Hello, everyone. I am Ben Johnson, and this is the Perpetual Chess Podcast. Perpetual Chess is a weekly interview show where top chess players, authors, content creators, and accomplished amateurs discuss their careers and share stories and chess improvement tips. Perpetual Chess is a part of the Blue Wire Podcast Network, and we'd like to give special thanks to our presenting chess education sponsor, Chessable.com. For more information about the show, you can go to perpetualchesspod.com. But without further ado, let's get to the show. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Perpetual Chess. We are joined this week by someone I should have interviewed many years ago. He is a Soviet-born turned American tournament legend. He's got a peak rating in the top 20 in the world. As a player, he's here in the U.S. He's won the World Open, the U.S. Open in Moscow, where he spent some formative years. He won the Aeroflot Open. We've been talking about the Chess Olympiad a lot. He's a six-time Chess Olympiad who has also coached the U.S. women's team. He's a renowned trainer who's coached many of the U.S.'s top talents, also worked with top international talents, and he still finds time to play. In fact, he won the 2021 U.S. Senior Open, and earlier this year, he traveled to El Salvador to compete in the Continental Cup, and he won a coveted spot in the World Cup, which is one of the strongest and most entertaining tournaments in the world. Those of you who heard my interview with Grandmaster Ben Finegold may have heard us discuss that briefly. So without further ado, let's welcome Grandmaster Gregory Kaidanov to the show. Welcome, Gregory.
Oh, thank you so much, Ben. I am a big fan of your podcast, and I dreamed being one day on your podcast, and the dream came true. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Well, that's nice of you to say. For me, it's more, it drives home the lesson. You never know who's listening. You know, you see the numbers, but you don't see the names. And obviously, I know that some strong and quite accomplished players like yourself listen, but still, as someone who grew up in the United States, played a lot of World Opens, always saw your name at the top of the leaderboard. It was quite an honor to hear that you listen to the show sometimes.
Yeah, I listen a lot. It's for me, it's invaluable source of information. Let's be honest, nowadays we rarely socialize in chess tournaments. Everybody's so busy with preparation and so forth. So to hear views and stories from my colleagues was great pleasure. Great pleasure.
Thanks. Well, I appreciate it. And as I told you moments ago, I mean, again, very familiar with your chess, but I've been digging into some of your interviews, and now I feel like I just have to make sure I don't lead you too much because you've got so many great stories and stuff. But Gregory, I would like to start with the qualification for the World Cup because, again, that was what really accelerated my timeline of feeling a need to interview you because not a lot of players, obviously you've accomplished tons, but at 62 years of age, not a lot of players are traveling to El Salvador, I assume, with the explicit intent of qualifying to play some of the strongest players in the world. So when did this idea take hold? And I'd love to just hear about the experience.
Okay, maybe I will disappoint you, but my idea to travel to El Salvador was not to qualify for the World Cup. So. Oh,
really?
Yeah. I didn't have many aspirations in this respect. I'm just my choice of tournaments is usually dictated by two factors: how well I'm prepared. I'm studying chess, all the time, and I'm trying to space my tournaments so that I find a tournament which is good timing, and I'm trying to play in tournaments which are held in one round a day. And of course, you're right that I'm looking for stronger tournaments. So those are my requirements, and so I like to play in continentals, period. Okay, because most tournaments have one round a day. There are days when there are double rounds, but that's okay. It's not like super important. And they usually are relatively strong. So hence the choice of the tournament.
Okay, because when I interviewed Grandmaster Robert Hungaski a couple years back, and I know that he was there at the Continental tournament with you, he was the one who had told me, like, obviously he's a grandmaster, but makes his living as a trainer. And he was saying he learned to be strategic about the tournaments he played. He'll often show up at the U.S. Open to try to qualify for the U.S. Championship. He plays the Continental to try to get into the World Cup. And it's not so much that he thinks he's going to be world champion, but it's just he covets these opportunities to still tangle with the best. So, and shout out to Robert. I know that your presence may have contributed to his not ending up qualifying for the World Cup this time.
Yeah. I mean, I'm also looking for strong tournaments, and qualifying to the World Cup was inspiring. There is no question about that.
And now that it's happened, I mean, you're welcome if you have any specific memories from the tournament, you're welcome to share them. But now that it's happened, I'm curious, does that like, obviously you said you've been working on your chess anyway, but does that give you extra motivation?
I played in many World Cups, right? And unfortunately, my results in all of them were terrible. One of the reasons was that the format is such that, you come, you play 2 games, and if you lose, you're out. And sometimes you have to travel to like Khanty-Mansiysk, right, in the past, like all across the globe. So, I felt like there was no point of preparing if you go and you might just play 2 games, and this is maybe one of explanation of my terrible results. But listening to Ben Finegold podcast, okay,
Yeah.
so now I do have extra motivation, because what happened was, I will just those listeners who didn't hear the interview. So Ben said that. Gregory Kaidanov qualified to the World Cup, and Christopher Yu qualified to the World Cup. And I expect Christopher Yu making noise at the World Cup. I don't think Gregory Kaidanov will make a noise at the World Cup. And I thought that, okay, now I'm going to prepare, and I'm going to come, and I'll try to make a noise at the World Cup, and, maybe win a couple of rounds or something like that. And even if I don't, and I will be eliminated, I will come in a tournament hall and I will scream at the top of my lungs, and then Finegold will be ashamed of his, prediction. So
I love it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that was my interview with Ben Finegold for listeners. Yeah, and I mean, we'd be rooting for you anyway, but as, again, more likely than not, I believe that Mikhail Krasenkow, who I think is a bit younger than you, but in his 50s, played in the recent one, but I'd say there's a good chance you will be the oldest competitor. So that alone, for a 45-year-old who's, feels like I'm climbing uphill trying to compete in chess, I'll definitely be rooting for you, Gregory.
Thank you.
But are you preparing more? I mean, you obviously, we all want to trash talk Finegold. That's a good goal, but does it impact your training at this stage?
Not at this stage, because I qualified for 2023 World Cup, which it is not known where it will happen. It's not known whether it will happen yet. So
Right.
It's. I'm just studying. Actually, I didn't study for the last month because I had grandchildren in my house. But as of yesterday, I started studying again.
Nice. How old are your grandchildren, Gregory?
5 and 7.
Oh, great. Yeah, I can't. My kids are 6 and 9 and growing up so quickly that I can already envision the feeling of grandchildren, the slightly more relaxing feeling of having grandchildren. Well, so you also recently played in a senior event here in the US. Do you have any other tournaments on the horizon?
No. I would like to play 1 or 2 tournaments before the end of the year, but I find hard times finding the tournament, because, like I said, I would like to play 1 round a day. I would like the tournament to be relatively strong, it's not easy to find a tournament. Maybe I will play in Sitges in Spain in December.
I really want to go there. It looks beautiful.
Right. And so far, that's kind of the only tournament I can think about, because I don't see many other options.
Well, if anyone listening, like say our friends in Charlotte or the New York Invitationals, if you got invited to like one of these round robin events, would you consider it? I know that they often, even being strong tournaments, have 2 games a day though.
Correct. First of all, 2 games a day, would be not acceptable for me. And plus, I don't like to play tournaments where I'm, top player or like number two. So I would like to play tournaments where I'm at least number 6, 7, and preferably below. So
That makes sense. And so it sounds like you for yourself have decided that one game a day is the way to go. I know that you work with a lot of top scholastic players, but have coached your share of adults as well. When you do coach working adults, do you advise them to be selective about the schedules that they play?
uh uh no, it depends. It purely depends on personality. There are people who are capable of playing multiple tournaments in a row, and this is completely fine. Um, but with the exception of maybe a couple of years, I was the person who likes to prepare for the tournament, and I didn't like to play many tournaments in a row. But of course, when I was young, it was no problem.
Yeah, that makes sense. And what about other adjustments to your game as you get older? Do you have any sort of, like, I recently interviewed your colleague Grandmaster Alex Fishbein, and he was talking about studying Korchnoi and some stylistic adjustments he's tried to make. Have you done any of that in your own game, Gregory?
I'm constantly thinking about this and constantly working on my game. And once again, it really depends on personality. But it's no secret that when you're getting older, your brain is getting slower, and usually blunders, calculation mistakes are the main reasons for older players to falter. Um, so I'm especially vigilant in working on my calculation. Um, but there are certain things which are not in your control, and the mistakes on the fourth or fifth hour of play are inevitable, and that's kind of what I'm experiencing, very often. And it's very, very difficult, to fight Mother Nature. And I'm trying to keep myself in shape and doing all things I can, but those things are obviously very challenging.
But you're managing to maintain a fairly, I mean, obviously, even for your level, a strong standard. So do you feel like you figured out a few tricks?
Um, I don't think there are tricks. It's just no. It's just regular work. I work a lot. Pandemic helped a lot because there was nothing else to do. There were not many distractions. Um, I lost some students, which was kind of a good thing for me because then I had more time for my own chess. And those 2 years were very good for my own study. I studied a lot. I spent a lot of time on openings, which I didn't do for many years. So it was great. It was really good.
Yeah, I asked both IM John Donaldson, who will be on the week before you, discussing the Olympiad, and obviously you know well, and
Hmm.
IM Greg Shahade, who you did many training sessions with when he was an up and coming player, and they both said that you're one of these people that seems to have more hours in the day than others because you teach a very busy schedule, but also they both mentioned that you manage to maintain your form. Greg said most of the older players, he's secretly keeping score of their ratings, and he says he just waits for them to fall below him. And he said it wasn't happening with you.
Um, it is happening. It just doesn't happen as quickly, but yeah, it is happening. I'm, about 100 points lower than I used to be. But I guess, I find consolation that many younger players are in the same position, so
Yeah.
it's not unusual. So I see, many younger players who at some point were, let's say, in upper 2600s and now below 2600. So it happens. So um,
Yeah, I know some people were looking forward to just sort of evaluating the Olympiad results because a lot of, as I discussed with Grandmaster Fishbein and others, people feel like there's maybe some rating deflation, or at least the a certain rating equates to a higher strength than it used to at the amateur level. But then the very top players in the world are maintaining their rating. So they were curious, would would that get pulled down a little bit? I haven't seen any data analysis about it yet, but it's good to hear that you also sort of you see that people are struggling, that the rating system may be changing.
Yeah, I mean, the pandemic definitely had a huge effect, and we're probably going to see this for I don't know how many, but maybe a couple of years or so. But there is no question that all those young players who didn't play live chess during the pandemic, they're hugely underrated, and we'll see the effect of that for some time. So.
Yeah, makes sense. And getting back to, you said you did take advantage of the pandemic to study an increased amount. Number one, I'm curious to hear what you did to work on your openings, and I'm also would like to know if you did anything outside of opening work to work on your own game.
My regimen is more or less the same through the years. Uh, like when I was a kid, I was studying Ben Larsen's 50 selected games, and he credited Nimzovich for recommending guessing moves from Grandmaster games. And Larsen himself mentioned that he did that. And then Alexander Kodov, in his famous book Think Like a Grandmaster, gives the same credit and tells the story about him doing the same, so-called solitaire chess. And Alex Fishbein was talking about this in his interview about that. And I even have suspicion that maybe I introduced him to solitaire chess when I met him in US during my first visit. This is a big part of my training. So I would strongly recommend to everyone, regardless of level and age. I started doing that when I was maybe 12, 13, something like that. And this is somehow less known method of training, so majority of people either never heard about it or just heard but never did it. But I find it extremely, extremely useful. And I can go on explaining the benefits of that and how to do this in the right way. But that's a big part of my work. Over the years, I started using this method. I started games of, oh my God, humongous number of players over, the whole chess history. Um, and it allowed me to understand their style, to learn a lot of things about them, not only chess-wise, but sometimes even, certain personal traits and so forth. So it's it's a lot of fun, and of course, it's very, very useful. Besides that,
Oh, hold on. I've got two follow-ups there before you go any
uh-huh,
further, if you don't mind.
sure.
Number one, I would like to hear you elaborate on the right way to do it, on the right way to play Guess the Move or solitaire chess, if you
Sure.
prefer that
This is the way
instruction.
I do it. You don't have to do it the way I do it, but the way I do it, I take it very seriously. Basically, I set up a chessboard. I put the clock next to the board. Um, um, uh, the computer is next to me, so you put chess base on the training mode, so you see only one move at the time. You skip the first opening moves. If you know the theory, you just skip until you see the first unfamiliar move. If you don't know the theory, I would say by default 12, 15 moves, right? So because there is no need to guess the first few moves because it's all theory, right? So after you skip those moves, you guess the moves for the winner. I always pick only games which were won by one of the players, which doesn't have to be this way. Once again, it's just me. And I try to imagine that I'm playing this game. Okay, so it's kind of funny, but I feel like a little kid when I'm doing that. I feel like I'm a kid, and since I'm doing this since I was a kid, right? So I don't have to, change my personality.
Mhm.
So I'm a kid. I'm Carlson playing MVL, right? And and I'm trying to think what would I do if I would be Carlsen in this position. And I know more or less Carlsen's style. Obviously, I can't guess every his move because then I will be Carlsen. But I know things which he probably would not do, and so therefore I try to narrow my candidate move search, and I'm trying to play in this style. In the past, I would write down every move on the score sheet, like during the game. I would write down the time I spend on my moves. Now, of course, I put everything in the computer, so I have a special file which is called Solitaire Chess, and every game has a time I spend. I put brief notes, so that's how I do it.
That's really impressive. Now, my question, of course, because between you and Grandmaster Fishbein, you guys extolling the virtues, I've obviously played solitaire chess in my life, but it hasn't been a big part of my training regimen. But I wonder, do you struggle at the moments, the critical moments? Obviously, everyone identifies those as the defining moments where you might sense that there's a tactic. But for me, when I'm solving a tactics puzzle, I have trouble summoning up the same intensity as a tournament game. And I feel like with solitaire chess, I might have that same issue. So when you get to these hairy, very tactical positions, are you able to dig in and think for 10 minutes when you're playing solitaire chess?
I'm struggling with this too. Everybody is going to struggle because, obviously it's very difficult to find motivation to think as hard during this exercise as you do in the tournament game. But that's okay. That's okay. So, but of course, if the position is very interesting and if I'm in the right frame of mind, I can think for a long period of time. Yes,
Okay.
but at the same time, there are moments when I rush and make horrible blunders, and that's okay. That's okay.
Okay. And the other thing is, I just wanted to mention for listeners, obviously, both Grandmaster Kaidanov and Grandmaster Fishbein mentioned using the chess-based training method, which I also would recommend. But not everyone has chess-based. But I believe Lee Chess Study has a feature that covers up the next move. If you just copy and paste a game from chessgames.com, like you look up a certain player, and then you can copy and paste a game and then put it in the mode where it covers up the next move. And obviously, if you're reading a selected game's chess book, the tried and true method is just to have a piece of paper that covers the upcoming moves. But just so that people know that it can be done in many ways without chess-based. And of course, there is Pandolfini's solitaire chess column, and obviously legendary teacher, and tries to explain things. So that can be a good source, especially for less experienced players. Now, bringing it back to what you were saying, Gregory, you mentioned you've done this for hundreds of players. So who was your favorite player to study using solitaire chess?
No question, Anatoly Karpov. So
Okay.
I pretty much studied every one of his wins multiple times. My memory, it will sound funny, but fortunately, is not great, and so I can look at the same games and barely remember something. So he's the player I learned the most from. Mm-hmm.
Oh, sorry. I was just going to say, I think some people will find that encouraging because so many, you hear like David Howell talk about Magnus Carlsen's otherworldly memory. And obviously there's videos of him online and many other examples of top players. So to hear such an accomplished player as yourself say that you when you see a game, you don't necessarily remember it, I think will encourage amateurs listening,
Absolutely.
such as myself.
But the best example is Karpov himself. It is well-known fact that Karpov doesn't have a good memory. But throughout the history, you will see examples of people, great players, not having good memory. Very, very fortunately, chess is not a game of memory. It helps. It helps when you have a great memory. But, if you read Mikhail Tal's best game book, he tells the story how he played Portish, and at some point, in postmortem, he starts showing Portish like in the opening, like, he says, "Oh, here I looked at this interesting move, and I wasn't sure." Then he catches Portish's glance, and Portish like amazed, and Tal says, "What's wrong?" And Portish says, "You played this move against me 3 years ago. See, so uh, obviously this is normal. So
Okay.
yeah.
That's a great story, yeah, and it's good to hear. And following up on Karpov, shout out to Fred Wilson, friend of the pod. I did listen to your old interview with him, and you mentioned Bavinnik and Karpov as your heroes growing up. And I know that you've played Karpov, so I'm curious what that felt like, Gregory. The first time you're sitting across from this person who you've played, so many games you've studied so assiduously.
This was fantastic, and also the time it was just amazing because in the summer of 1993, my wife, two kids, and they went to Moscow, and I invited Dmitry Gurevich and Alex Shabalov to our house in Lexington, and so we spent maybe 10 days basically studying Karpov's games, and it was immense pleasure, and also it was extremely useful for all three of us. And then in November, completely unexpectedly, I was playing this knockout tournament in Tilburg, and I won first three matches against pretty strong grandmaster. It was Kuprejchik, Campara, Argentinian grandmaster Daniel Campara, and then I beat Pickett, who was high-rated grandmaster than me. And all of a sudden, I faced Karpov, and this was one of the situations. I had the same experience earlier in my life when I played Tal, that I was sitting at the board, smiling, and and just looking at my opponents. So because I knew his style so well after just studying a lot of his games, it was a pleasure and was easy for me to play. And he was in great form. He won this tournament. I lost in the rapid game. I lost one rapid game, so we played four games. Three were draws, and I lost one rapid game, which actually was the game where I had a pretty big advantage. But anyway, it was a very special and extremely pleasurable experience.
Yeah, and this is 1993, pretty close to peak Karpov. Just must have been incredible experience
Right,
to
right,
process.
right. So Linares 1994 is probably his best tournament ever. Right, right.
Although, of course, you were no slouch yourself, we should say, in fairness. So, yeah, I mean, hearing you tell these stories, Gregory, I think it's about time for us to hear your epic emigration tale to the U.S. But first, we need to take a quick break and hear from our sponsors. Perpetual Chess is brought to you by our presenting chess education sponsors, Chessable.com. Chessable, of course, utilizes spaced repetition to help you remember opening sequences and tactical patterns, and they have a huge catalog of excellent courses, and they're dropping new ones at a blistering rate. New courses include one by Grandmaster Maurice Ashley. There's the new course Grind Like a Grandmaster by Magnus Carlsen himself with his friend Grandmaster David Howell. And The Life and Games of Mikhail Tal, which is an absolute classic book, is now on Chessable. And the video is done by Ginger GM himself, Simon Williams. So be sure to go to Chessable.com. They also have tons of stuff that you can check out for free. So Chessable.com, check out what's new. And we are back, and we're going to pick it up right where we left off. And again, Gregory has an amazing story of coming to the U.S. I always enjoy hearing these. So, Gregory, I give the floor to you.
Okay, so the first visit, this was before immigration. So in 1990, my wife and I came to United States with a private visit. My friend Dmitry Gurevich, who played a huge role in my life, who helped me at various stages of my life, many times. So he invited us to visit him in U.S. and he arranged lots of things for me. And the first thing was tournament in Manhattan Chess Club, and it was a very memorable tournament because in the last round I played legendary Yefim Geller, and I was a point behind him, and by beating him in the game we tied for first place, and I won $1,000, which at the time was a humongous amount of money for Soviet Union. So and I made friends with Alex Fishbein and his dad, Gregory Fishbein. And after the tournament, they took us to a restaurant somewhere in Manhattan. And we had our suitcases, so we moved from one place to another, right? We had suitcases in the car. It was early days of the remote control when you open the car with the help of remote control. And when we came back from restaurant, both our suitcases were gone. So, I mean, my wife obviously was upset about her wardrobe, which
Right.
which she brought from Soviet Union and which had a lot of European nice European clothes. But for me, the biggest blow was my chess notes. So all my chess notes were gone, and this was a huge blow. But this was not the end of it. So 2 days later, we were walking in Manhattan, and the corner of 42nd Street and Broadway. We were obviously we behaved like tourists, and we were attacked by a bunch of people, and we ended up being robbed from this $1,000 which I won in this tournament. So it was a pretty bad experience, and I was ready to leave, but my wife said no. We came here. I'm not going back to Moscow. So and and I complied, and the rest of the trip was amazing. So Dmitry, who at the time was playing tournament in St. Martin's, came back. He called me. He found out what happened, and he arranged a lot of tournaments for me to play. And one of those tournaments, first tournament, was in Louisville, Kentucky. But before coming to Louisville, I came to Lexington, gave a simul in Lexington. They played tournament in Louisville, which I won, and I won some money in Louisville. And then I tied for first in National Open, and I won some other tournaments. So in the end of the trip, I more than made up for those $1,000 lost in Manhattan. So this was a great trip. But the most important thing, that I made friends in Kentucky, and one of them, Ken Troutman, who became my lifelong friend, basically did a lot of work with immigration, and 2 years later, we came here.
Yeah, just an amazing story. I mean, the full scope of Welcome to America, from being from being robbed to having people be nice to you. Glad that it worked out in the end. And Gregory has a great website where he tells the story in prose. Invite listeners to check that out as well. But let's rewind a little bit, because I know that now obviously you've built quite a successful career for yourself as a trainer and player, being I think the only grandmaster in Kentucky. Certainly, that's been the case at times over the years. But why was your wife so resolute to? I mean, and you presumably to leave Moscow at the time?
Oh, this was tough time. So this was very tough time. At the time when we left, there was a shortage of everything. Um, it was a moment when money was not a problem. I was extensively playing in Europe and winning prizes, but you couldn't do anything with the money because the store shelves were completely empty, and we had two little kids, and even buying food was a struggle. So this was no brainer. We immigrated on the day when Soviet Union collapsed.
Wow.
So yeah, it was December 21st, 1991. Yeah.
And did your family consider places other than the United States?
Um, it, Basically, at this moment, we were trying to, go anywhere we could, but um, I always dreamed about United States, but it was just most of the time, it was a dream. When you live in Soviet Union, there is Iron Curtain and there is no chance whatsoever. So when and I remember Ken Troutman asking, like, would you like to come here? And it's like, would you like to come to paradise, or would you like remain in hell? So it's this was a silly question, but it was difficult to do. But after it happened, it was amazing.
Now, of course, obviously, eventually, you grow up, but as a kid, you're told lots of propaganda about the United States and the superior standard of living in the Soviet Union. As you become a traveling chess professional, of course, it opens your eyes a little bit. But growing up, were you always sort of skeptical of the party line?
I was very lucky because since I was a little kid, I was exposed to other views, mostly among from my friends, chess players. So I grew up in a city called Kaliningrad, and I went to Pioneer House like many other Soviet chess players. And I had a group of friends, and they all were um, their parents were listening to Voice of America and BBC, and I started doing this since I was like maybe 9, 10 years old. And so you can say I was exposed to Western propaganda more than Soviet propaganda.
Okay.
And it was very successful. So the propaganda, I mean, so I was I like I said, I dreamed about United States since I was a little kid.
Okay. And I wanted to clarify something. So I know you were born in Ukraine. Your family moved to Kaliningrad, which is in the former Soviet Union, on the other side of the Baltic states from continental Russia. But then you also moved to Moscow at some point. So when did your family move from Kaliningrad to Moscow?
No, no, my family didn't move.
Oh,
My
okay.
family lived in Kaliningrad basically, all the time. My mother went to Ukraine just to give me a birth because her mother lived there, but I didn't really live in Ukraine.
Okay.
But Moscow, I went to college in Moscow.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
and after college I stayed.
Okay. My apologies. And you've discussed in interviews, and that actually sheds a little light because I believe it was Mike Klein. Shout out to Mike Klein. He did a profile of you in Chess Life in 2009, which I'll link to, and listeners can find. Of course, Chess Life graciously has their whole archive free online. He quoted you talking about the famed pioneer Paulus, which of course Fishbein discussed, and Peter's Fiddler when I interviewed him, of course coming from St. Petersburg. And you dispelled some myths, at least from what you experienced in Kaliningrad, about what made the Soviet chess culture special. So in your mind, Gregory, what differentiated it from the other places at the time?
Um, I think Greg Shahade said it very well that he was talking about like what makes kids strong, right? And when he found what makes different from stronger kids to weaker kids, he found out that they play a lot and they play stronger players. Okay, and I think that's the main reason why Soviet Union was so good in chess. That almost regardless where you live, and Kaliningrad was a town of 300,000 population, right? But the chess culture was huge. There was a chess club. There was tournament almost every day, and there were always, for me, stronger players to play. And I think that's the main reason. But also just the culture. You come to the chess club and you meet other players, and they tell you the stories. They showed you the positions, and you see them analyze, and all those things contribute to you getting stronger.
But it was not so much a formal education as sort
No,
of
no. In a
just
matter of fact, I didn't have, I never had a coach in my life except a period of maybe 1 or 2 years when a master Valery Zhuravlev, who is now lives in Latvia, not to be confused with his brother Nikolai, who wrote a very good book for beginners. So Valery Zhuravlev was my coach for maybe a year, but all he did, he just showed me notebooks with his annotated games, and this was good enough. So he was super critical of his own play, and he was analyzing his games very deeply. And he just showed to me the way the chess should be studied, and this basically set me for life.
wow. Yeah. And you've mentioned, I mean, you made Grandmaster at 29, which is really late these days, but even in those days was a little bit late. And you've mentioned previously that every level up was a struggle. Can you walk us through sort of the long journey to you? I mean, because to make it to number 16 in the world and to have played all these legends, one might think things came easily to you, but I guess
it was incredibly hard. I would encourage listeners to go to my website, kaidanov.org, and there will be a tab, My Story, and you will read the story how I lost my game, like getting checkmated in 6 moves when I was
right, the game's there, right?
right.
Yeah.
When I was 10 years old, and so this was the first huge blow, and there were a lot of blows like that, like at every stage, every barrier was, I mean, every goal which I had, every title was very, very difficult to obtain, and it was a struggle all the time. But yeah, and the fact that I became a grandmaster very late, of course, part of it was the lack of opportunities, because in Soviet Union, obviously, it was closed society. It was not easy to get to international tournaments, though. Some can say that I had more opportunities than other players because I lived in Moscow, and if you live somewhere in Siberia, there were much less opportunities for those players. So,
Right. And you studied railroad engineering in Moscow. Did you take a job when you finished university, Gregory, or were you
I had
pursuing
to.
chess at that point?
I had to. First of all, the reason I went to railroad engineering school was just because they had a good chess team, and I knew I want to play chess, and I needed to find a college where the study would be not too hard, and I will be able to continue playing chess. And it was a perfect choice, actually.
Oh, really? It doesn't strike me as a an easy choice.
Yeah. But I studied so-called economics of railroad transport, and so it was it was not super hard. Yeah.
Okay.
It
And
was hard. It was hard, especially because I'm not a technical guy. So some subjects which had a lot of technical terms and technical theory was hard for me, but still it was not super difficult. So
and when you were 18 and you're making your university decision sort of based on chess considerations, what do you think your chess strength was at that point, Gregory? I know you'd been playing a long time, but what do you think you?
I was not even a master at the time. But and again, this may be partially because of lack of opportunities, because in a year after starting college, I became a master. And matter of fact, I won the championship of Moscow region, where I was only, there were only 2 Canada masters, I think, and 16 masters. And so I won clear first, and this was kind of a beginning of a rise.
Okay, so probably 2,300 FIDE strength or something by the time you're
Uh,
19.
uh, I mean, again, their then ratings then and now are so different.
Yeah, no, I'm less interested in what your rating actually was as compared to like where you feel your strength was, because it still seems like obviously a lot of us love chess and try to find a way to make it part of our careers. But at 19, even with ratings being lower, than it seems ambitious. Obviously, it worked out. You made the right decision, but that's what I'm just trying to get at.
Yeah, but again, it's different times, so you have to compare not ratings of the past and ratings of today, but you have to compare like how was I compared to other people of my age, for example. You see?
Yeah, that's what I was getting at.
Right,
And so
right.
you were still strong for your age.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. So, um, uh, though some of my peers made a huge jump at this point, like I was growing up with players like Sergei Dolmatov and Lev Psakis, and I was better than them when we were, let's say, 12, 13 years old. But then slowly, they were getting better and much better. And at the time when I was 19, I just became a master, and both of them already were They either became a grandmasters or maybe they became grandmasters 20, something like that. So there was a huge gap in those years. And what I learned over the years is that people are just developing differently. So some people are getting. It was not because I studied less than them. It was not. People just developing differently. Sometimes it has to do with maturity. So there are a lot of factors which come into becoming a successful tournament player.
Yeah, that makes sense, and that calls to mind a story you told in your interview with Fred. Speaking of Grandmaster Lev Sakis, of his studying a Bobby Fischer book. Can you share that story with our listeners?
Yeah. So Sakis basically became a great player by studying Fischer's book. And when I was a little kid, I wanted to improve so badly that I asked every my friend, like, what did you do? And for example, I told you about Sergei Dolmatov, and I was better than him. And then one summer, we meet, and it's clear that he's better than me. So just few months, and ask him, what did you do during those few months? And he said, I started games of Mikhail Chigorin. And I said, oh, that's a secret. You studied Chigorin's games, and that's how you become much better. And of course, I studied Chigorin's games, and I didn't see anything interesting in this. He was blundering left and right. His opponents were blundering left and right, and yeah, he played some nice combinations occasionally, but I didn't find anything appealing in those games, and it didn't make me better. Then there was a story about Sakis, so I found a book of Bobby Fischer's complete games, right, in English, and I copy every game in my notebook because somebody just gave me this book for a few days, right, maybe a few weeks. So, and I studied all Fischer's games, and it was the same thing, that I didn't feel like I can relate to his style. I didn't feel like I can learn a lot from him. So, and this taught me that you have to find yourself the player who you can learn from. And at this time, Botvinnik was the player who helped me to get on the next level.
Yeah, I love it. It's like a chess parable. Everyone, even to this day, we all want to know the one book that's gonna lead to a breakthrough, but you just never know.
Right.
Okay, well, Gregory, we need to take one more break, and then I want to hear more about all of the students that you've worked with over the years. We'll be right back. Perpetual Chess is brought to you in part by Aimchess.com. Aimchess has an algorithm which reviews your games from the major chess playing sites and then gives you actionable information about what to work on. I haven't been playing as much Blitz lately, just been busy with family stuff. And when I review my games, it shows. My openings are still good, but I need to work on my tactics, my end games, my advantage capitalization, and some other stuff. The good news is that Aimchess has the tools to help you work on those things. You can review the specific tactics that you missed within the game, among countless other features. So you can check out Aimchess for free, and then if you do decide to subscribe, use the code Perpetual30 to save 30% on the first month, or you can also use the link in the show description for aimchess.com. And we are back, and you discuss on your website and in other interviews, and I'm sure there's many other top players that we aren't even aware of. But let's start with you're working with Grandmaster Maurice Ashley as he was trying to become a Grandmaster. Let's hear about that, Gregory.
First of all, I would like to say one thing. When you're working with a student, and your student reaches very, very high level, right? So let's say he gets a great result under your tutelage, right? So you can never be sure how much of this is his talent and how much is actually your contribution. So and I personally never knew about that, and so in many cases I'm afraid to take credit for somebody's great result because I was their coach. However, with Maurice, I know I helped him a lot, just because we were able to find the problems. We were able to fix those problems, to find ways to work on them, and so this was great. Maurice was a very creative player who uh, but he was trying to create in situations where you maybe have to play technically or just be, play routine moves, right? And so, and after we found out that, we just made some adjustments, and Maurice is incredibly talented. He understood everything he needs to do, and slowly, he started to improve. And it's very interesting that his favorite player is Tigran Petrosian, which he was talking about in his interviews many times. And if you talk to other people, they will say, for example, Yuri Razuev, who I have tremendous respect for, he said, no, Petrosian was incredibly passive, coward player. You shouldn't study his games. You see, but it did work for Maurice. And I have one friend in Russia, Igor Yanvaryov, who wrote he's IM. So he wrote a book about Petrosian, and he was fascinated. Maybe he's GM now. And he was always fascinated by his style. So, you just need to find a player you like and you can learn from.
And so Maurice, it was Petrosian, even though he plays nothing like him, as you described.
Exactly. But the same thing for me was Karpov. You see, so the chess which Karpov is playing was completely foreign to me when I started studying his games. But I was able to learn and incorporate his ideas into my own style, and it helped tremendously.
And of course, Gregory, we have a lot, mostly adult listeners to this podcast, and we're all trying to stave off Father Time. Do you think there's added value to studying positional players for players who are not like young, scholastic future professionals?
Uh, I'm not sure I understand.
Like, do you think it's better to study as an adult who's probably not going to make like a 400-point jump in their tactical ability?
Mm-hmm.
Do you think it's better to study positional players like Karpov and Petrosian, or is it just whatever strikes your fancy?
Ben, this is the wrong question. So, because what to study and who to study depends completely on your personality. So everyone has a personality. Everyone is different. Everyone's mistakes and deficiencies are different. And depending on what those mistakes and deficiencies are, you need to do different kind of work. And you don't have to study games of any particular player. You see, you maybe have to do some kind of work which have nothing to do with chess, or if it is chess, it may be just completely different direction. It's impossible to say what you have to do unless you know, you learn things about yourself, you know what your problems are, and then you can kind of design a course of action and decide what needs to be done to improve your chess.
Great advice. Yeah, and I know you've talked in the past about how that's sort of how you approach when you take on a new student. Maybe you could walk us through, Gregory, like what you would encounter as a typical problem with, say, either whether it be a young talent or an adult amateur, and like what you would recommend. Just like you don't have to name names, but just sort of one case study.
Okay, there are many. Yeah, I can tell, several hundred of stories, right? Because I had so many students over the years, all kind of levels of ages, all background. So, but basically, like what I do, it's always personalized approach. So it takes into account everything. Um, Besides the age, the people are so different in how they learn, right? So some people are good learning from verbal instructions, some are not. So I had over the years many talented players who uh, who are not very good in learning from verbal instructions. You see, so which means that you tell them, like, you just need to play a lot or do solitaire chess, and solitaire chess is also not for everyone. You see, so some people find it so boring they can't do that. So I have to find another way of training for them. So it's so personal. But I can tell a lot of stories. Okay, here is one story. For example, I had a student who was maybe at 1800 level, and she was one of the best for her age in the country. But her mistakes were, she, for whatever reason, was afraid to make pawn moves, specifically pawn breaks. And for a year, analyzing her games, I would just say, you have to do a pawn break. You have to do a pawn break. Look, position is closed. You have to open it. You have to do a pawn break. And she just didn't do it. And then after 1 year, and her rating stagnated, she didn't improve much, and then in 1 year all of a sudden everything changed and she started doing pawn break and the rating goes up 100 points. And so it's just one story, but there are lots of stories which will be similar to that.
Interesting. And were there, in that case, were there any specific recommendations? I mean, because it's one thing to be told by a coach, but sometimes you need like inspiration. Are there any
Yeah, so
like
sometimes I would send her exercises in which exercises the right move is a pawn break, you see. But I don't remember exactly her story because it was many years ago. But in general, people just have mental blocks, and a lot of times it's not issue of not being able to learn, but it's issue of psychology. It's and it's very interesting for me to do those things because I feel sometimes like it's a privilege. You get inside people's brain, and you understand so many things about them. If I would be a corporation, I would have a slogan: helping people to learn about themselves through the game of chess.
that's great. Yeah.
So it's so interesting to see people's games, and sometimes without any feedback, to know how their brain works and what are strong sides and what are weak sides and so forth. But of course, listening helps a lot. So that's why doing solitaire chess with my students is one of my favorite activities, because they talk, I talk, they can hear how grandmaster thinks, and I can hear how they think, and I can eliminate the deficiencies in their thinking.
Makes sense. Well, let's hear about a few more of your students. So, you, of course, famously worked with Josh Waitzkin, who has moved on from the chess world, but legend here in America, the subject of the movie Searching for Bobby Fischer and book, we should say. What was working with Josh like?
Okay, so working with Josh would probably, this was not a success story, okay? So, and Josh, frankly, talks about this in his books. So he wrote a few books, and he describes his struggles. I can go on talking about how I think, he blames this on other people, and I mean, occasionally he would say that, I also was not right. But anyway, but overall. First of all, I'm incredibly grateful to his dad, Fred, because Fred basically helped me to develop chess business. So he invited me to New York City. I was teaching Josh for many years, and Fred also found another students in New York City and New Jersey, and I was coming to people's homes, and that's how I taught chess in 1990s. So maybe I would make 5-6 visits a year to New York City, and that's basically would be majority of my income. Um, and but I don't like to discuss my students, and I because some things are private, and and since Josh was not like I said, was not a success story, right? So I definitely helped him to improve, and he got better, but he quit chess before becoming a grandmaster, and with his talent and his resources, this was obviously not good, not a success story, like I said.
Yeah, although at least he's been successful in subsequent years.
Correct. He found success in life, um, actually he says in his books that his chess experience helped him in that, and that's great. That's great.
Yeah, I mean, clearly to become like world class in mixed martial arts,
Right. And not only in
probably,
martial arts, he became a successful businessman.
yeah.
So yeah, he's doing great.
Yeah, good to hear. And for more background on the Waitzkins, Fred and Bonnie Waitzkin recently did an interview with Dan Lucas on the One Move at a Time podcast. So any American listeners who missed that might want to check it out. It was fun to hear. Now, moving on to sort of the elite players you've worked with. You mentioned on your website you worked with the legend Vasyl Ivanchuk.
Right. This was great experience, and it definitely was experience which helped me a lot. Though there were only 2 weeks, our training session went only for 2 weeks. We did communicate over the years. We still occasionally talk on Skype, but um, yeah, everybody who knows Vasily knows that he's a genius, and he is maybe one of the strongest people ever playing chess, and maybe one of people who understand chess on the deepest level, right? And the fact that he didn't become a world champion have nothing to do with that. It just kind of proves the fact that in order to become world champion or a successful player, you have to have certain number of qualities which very difficult to get in one person. So, but it was fantastic experience, and also gave me a lot of confidence because I realized that I could keep up with him in certain moments. Obviously, he's much stronger player than I am, and or I was at the time when we worked together. But I was competitive, let's put it this way, during our work, during our blitz sessions. Of course, he would beat me most of the time, but it was great experience, and I think it helped my rise because it happened shortly before I migrated to America.
Oh, okay. Um, how did it come about? How did the relationship come about?
I first met Vasily because we played a game in the first league of Soviet Championship, which he brilliantly won. Nobody knew him at the time. He was just I don't remember. He was maybe 16 or 17 years old, and he was one of the lowest rated participants. And he played some kind of obscure variation of Queen's Gambit, accepted, which I didn't know, and later became super popular. D39 index now. Um, and I could give a perpetual check, but since this was kind of this little teenage, I mean, the teenager who I didn't know much, I decided to play, and I got crushed. And then we played maybe one more game before, and I mean we met in a lot of tournaments, so we were kind of friends before. And then I was offered to have a training session with him before his candidate matches, and we met, and he had a good run in those candidate matches. So um, yeah,
And
really good.
And on your website, you've got a picture of him in Israel in 2005, and he's wearing a University of Kentucky jacket. Obviously,
Right,
you live in
right.
Kentucky.
This was during the World Team Championship, and we went on the free day. We went to the tour, right? And I think he was complaining that he's cold, and I gave him this jacket, and yeah, and made this picture. So
Okay, I figured it couldn't be a coincidence that he
right.
was wearing that jacket. Just a great photo to check out. And what about other players you've worked with? I mean, obviously, not all student-teacher relationships are public, but are there any other relationships you're particularly proud of over the years, whether they be with top players or with scholastic players?
Um, like I said, I don't want to talk about this too much because it will create, create impression that I kind of, brag about making those people better. But um, I was very close to Ray Robson
Hmm.
when I worked with him. So I would say, he was a great kid, and we had a great bond. And I really, really, really enjoy working with Ray when he was a little kid. And but this brings me maybe to the next subject because like who is a good student, right? Because many
Yeah.
people think about good students being the most talented students, and I completely disagree with that. I would say that the best student is enthusiastic student. So that's what I like so much. And I had a lot of students who were maybe weaker players, adult or kid, but they were enthusiastic about chess. They were very articulate. They like to talk about chess. They like to talk about themselves, and that helps teacher a lot. So when you hear feedback, when you hear how a person talks and how he thinks, that makes teaching very enjoyable. At the same time, sometimes you have kids who are either shy or just for whatever reason uh, don't talk a lot, and that makes it very difficult. So even if they're strong players, it's not easy to get into their brain and help them to become better.
That makes sense. Yeah, I mean, it sounds like you have a very personal approach to
Right,
your
right,
teaching.
I do.
And as we record this, the Olympiad concluded a couple weeks ago. Everyone's raving about the performances of Abdussatorov and Gukesh, among others. Do you follow these top tournaments now that you're not traveling to them as frequently? And I'm also curious what you think about all these young talents.
Yes, I follow those tournaments very closely, but um, one thing I don't do, I don't like to follow games live, because I would like to save all those games for solitaire so that I can go over those games later very slowly, very meticulously, and enjoy them and learn from them. Okay, so for example, I looked at some of Gukesh game using solitaire chess, but not all of them. Abdussatorov, I had a chance to study his games prior to the Olympiad. So at some point, it was clear that he's a rising star, and I just took all his wins and started studying all his wins since he became very good. So it's it's so much pleasure to see games of players when they are young and good, and because they always play in a different style compared to how they're gonna play later. So there is this raw talent which you can see. Well, but after you become stronger, it sounds funny, but you get much more knowledge, but you lose something. You lose this freshness. You lose this ability to do things which you did before, and you just become a different player basically. And so to study games of those young guys is very, very interesting.
Ivan Sokolov, who of course was coaching the gold medal winning Uzbek team in the Olympiad, compared Abdusatorov's style to Magnus Carlsen. Does that ring true to you, Gregory?
Not really, not really. But at the same time, I don't know him as well as Ivan does, so it's hard for me to tell. Um, I did not study his games obviously as deeply as Ivan does, but um, it's hard. It's hard to make direct comparison because players, each one has a personality. Each great player is different. So, like people used to, like to put labels like tactical player or positional player, right? But I learned it from Razovayev, who had a very interesting observation about every player. And I try to kind of learn from his approach. And basically, what you see is 50 shades uh, in the chess game, right? And instead of tactical and positional, you can say many things about player you know very well. And um, and 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 that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to extract some interesting things, and sometimes it works, and sometimes I can say, like there are lots of things I can say about, Anatoly Karpov, Richard Rapport, Vasyl Ivanchuk, some specifics, which and I can't say those things about other players. So, like, majority of modern players are so universal that it's very difficult to say like how different they are from each other. But they are.
Yes.
But of course they are.
Yeah. I mean, especially, but I mean, these kids are all 2,700. So like when you get to that level, you're pretty universal.
Right, right, right. But still, you're universal. But still, you just need to get. You need to dig deeper, and then you will see some individual things. You will see some things which make this particular player different from everybody else.
Makes sense. Um, well, a couple things. First, I just want to clarify that in the Sokolov Magnus Carlsen comparison, he's not saying Abdusatorov's going to be the next world champion per se. He's just saying his game. Mm-hmm. I'm not clarifying this for you, Greg, but that his style is reminiscent of the way that Magnus plays. Now, for you, Gregory, do you have a favorite player out of all this young crop? I mean, obviously, there's like Firouzja and Nihal Sarin as well. Amongst many others.
Not among them, but my favorite modern player by far is Richard Rapport. So I just love his games. I love his style. I feel very bad that he doesn't play as much as other players, but he's amazing. He's truly amazing in the way his brain works and how much you can learn from his games. So he's my favorite player.
Okay, I'll move him to the top of the list of solitaire chess that I need to undertake. Gregory, are you okay on time? I mean, this has been amazing, but I know you've got more stories to tell. I've certainly got more in my notes.
Sure, yeah.
Excellent. All right. Well, let's go to again in the aforementioned article with Mike Klein. You played a young Viswanathan Anand, and I know on your website there's also a picture of you interviewing him in 2005, I believe it was. So let's hear about you beat Anand, I should say, a young Anand. So let's hear about your interactions with this legend.
Yeah, this was very interesting story. So it was 1987, I believe, and we played in tournament in Moscow. Vishy just became a world junior champion. And I think it was four-way tie for first. If I remember correctly, him, Vasily Ivanchuk, Joe Latier, and maybe Gregory Serper, but my memory could be wrong. And he came to play tournament in Moscow, and I played him somewhere, I think at the start of the tournament. No, I don't remember the number of the round, but he played incredibly fast. He spent maybe 20 minutes for the whole game, and of course he made a lot of mistakes and he lost. But there was very interesting moments. So basically, in the end of the game, I played this queen sacrifice, and it's checkmate in like 3 moves or something, right? And at this moment, he raises his eyes, like I play queen takes f7 check, and he sees what's happening, And he raises his eyes and he looks at me, and there is so much pain in his eyes that I felt, I very rarely feel sorry for my opponent,
Right.
but I did feel sorry. And we talked after the game, and we became friends. And somewhere toward the end of the tournament, it was a tradition at this time, right, to send your best games to Chess Informant, right? So the game will appear in Chess Informant, you will get paid, and everybody was doing that, including me. And so Vishy said, Gregory, may I ask you not to send this game to Informant?
Oh no.
And I
But
didn't. And I didn't.
oh, okay.
And I did not uh, uh, basically, talk about this game publicly for a long time. But then when I turned 50 and Chess Life asked me, to send my best games, I thought, okay, maybe it's about time. Vishy is already, you know, world champion for many years, so I think he will forgive me.
Yeah, I would say his legacy is secure. But yeah, it's a beautiful, beautiful finishing combination and a great miniature game. So I definitely recommend listeners check it out. Um, Anything else on Vishy before we go to some other names on my list, Gregory?
Oh, there was another story which happened soon afterwards. I think it was maybe 2 years later. Vishy comes to play in Moscow, and we play in this one of those GMA tournaments. I think it was 1989, right? Um, and my tournament is okay. I may be +1 or something like that, right? But Vishy loses 3 games in a row, and he's in terrible mood. And we take a walk, and I'm trying to console him as much as I can, right? He lost 3 games in a row. And I say, Vishy, you're a great player. And he says, no, no, Gregory, you're a much better player than me. And I, and I say, you're gonna be one of the best players in the world, but whatever I say, obviously, it's hard to console a person talking about the future when he lost 3 games in a row. But I thought it was funny, yeah, especially in retrospect. So
Yeah, I mean, I think it's instructive in that no one's immune from self doubt, no matter who you will become.
right, right.
um, okay, and Belgrade 1988. You played three of the participants of Zurich 1953 in the same
Right,
tournament.
right, right, right. This was great. Yeah, this was also a great story. Yeah, in the first 4 rounds, I played Semi Rishevsky, uh, Mark Taimanov, and Yefim Geller. Yeah, no, I played Geller 5th round. So maybe Rishevsky second or third, Taimanov the fourth, and Geller the 5th round. Right, right. And my game against Mark Taimanov probably was, though it was a short game, probably was one of the best, if not the best game of my life, because um, I sacrificed a pawn, a piece, a rook, and a queen. Not all sacrifices were accepted, but yeah, consecutive sacrifices in this order. So this was very memorable game. But not only it was a memorable game, it's basically set me for life financially, which is amazing, right? How one game can bring you so much wealth. But here is the story. So um, this was one of the first uh, cases when there was a brilliancy prize for the game. So, and I have to say that Edward Guffield, who many people have some harsh words for, including myself. I'm not a big fan of him, but he was a big proponent of establishing brilliancy prizes, and there was a brilliancy prize of $4,000 in this tournament, and I got this brilliancy prize for this game. And it came in the perfect moment because we lived in Moscow in a 2-bedroom apartment, and we already have 2 kids. And there was opportunity to upgrade to a 3-bedroom apartment, and we didn't have much money. And basically, this brilliancy prize made it possible to do that. And then we migrated to ES, and the real estate prices in Moscow skyrocketed, and so I was able to sell this apartment for much bigger amount of money and buy home in Lexington. So
Oh, great.
so
That
that's what
that is
happened. Yeah.
that is a great story. And did you have any personal interactions either with Grandmaster Taimanov or Reshevsky or Geller, who you played multiple times?
Yeah. I did. With Reshevsky, I played twice next year. Yeah. This game was in 1988, and then I played him in 1989 in the same. I mean, GMA tournament in Moscow. So we played in Belgrade and Moscow, and I was able to win both games and with a knight sacrifice on d5, standard sacrifice. Though none of the games was Sicilian. Um, uh, uh, and After I beat Taimanov, we were interviewed, both of us, by Yugoslavian TV, and he was very gracious in defeat. And he said, I'm not even a bit upset. My opponent played great. Uh, I feel good to be a co-author of such great game. And with Geller, also with Geller I had many conversations. Yeah, in Belgrade and after. But nothing, like extraordinary. Um,
And Reshevsky, perhaps not as disliked on the level of Geller, but I know, like, for example, Stuart Rachel's had some negative interactions with him. He mentioned when I interviewed him. Were your interactions with Reshevsky okay?
Yeah. There was nothing unpleasant. I think at the beginning of the first game, I told him what an honor for me to play him, and he politely smiled, and this was about it. But I mean, both times when he lost the game, obviously he was very upset. But he shook my hand, and that's already good enough.
Okay, nice. And you're still playing these high level events, traveling to Europe for Isle of Man and Gibraltar. So I saw that you played Grishuk. Any story to go along with that game?
Um, yeah, this was my second game with Grishuk. First time I lost to him in New York Open 2000.
Wow, young Grishuk.
Right. He was maybe 17 years old. And this was second game. The most interesting story about this game against Grishuk is that I was sitting next to Anand. Vishy was right on my right. So and before the game, he turned to me and he says hello to a fellow veteran. So
That's nice.
though he's much younger than me, I mean much, maybe like I don't know, 10 years or so. Yeah, but game against Grishuk was very instructive. And we had a nice conversation later after the game. But it was instructive because, at some point I could play knight c5 and get triple pawns, and this was my first candidate move. But I rejected it because I thought my position would be passive. And then after the game, he told me, I think this was the best move. And I was kind of dismissive, and I said, no, but my position was passive. This could not be the best move. And then, of course, I came home, look at the engine, and engine says it is a best move. And I felt very arrogant and stupid. Like, why would I say that? But that's what happened. Yeah.
Okay. And how do you work with engines? Obviously, you've been a chess professional for their basically full evolution. So, how do you work with them these days, Gregory?
Um, like other people, I don't have any super secrets, but um, but I do use them extensively. Let's put it this way. I started using them from the very beginning, when they became, half decent good. And I always was big fan of technology. I always have to have, the best phones,
Mhm.
the fastest computer and so forth. And so I started using engine very early, and it cost me because at some World Open I decided to trust an engine and used a very dubious opening line against Alex Goldin in the last round of World Open, and it went terribly. So I lost the game, and it was only because Fritz, whatever it was, Fritz 4 or something like this, took material which I shouldn't have taken. So
But that doesn't really engine doesn't lead you wrong anymore, right? Or
yeah. Nowadays, things like this didn't happen. I heard with a great interest your podcast with Matthew Sadler, and this was very, very educational and very interesting. So
yeah,
it, it,
he's
it
a
definitely
fascinating.
gave me some ideas.
And when you're playing solitaire chess, if you're stumped about a move, if you can't understand someone's rationale, will you turn the engine on, A, right away, or B, like when you're done? Since I know you said you use a chess set when you're doing it.
Either way, yeah. Sometimes I turn it right away. Sometimes I wait until I'm done and I turn it. But yeah, I use engines extensively, um, and my most um, the most interesting thing about solitaire and the most enjoyable thing for me is to understand how grandmaster who played this game thought, his whole thought process, right? Like, why did he play this move? What did he miss? What did he see? Uh, that's the most interesting thing for me. And of course, engines sometimes help you because you look at this and you say, okay, but if the opponents would play this move, I think the opponent made a mistake. If he would play this move, it would be a refutation. You turn engine says such and such, and yeah, and you understand that's the reason.
So you're not one of these trainers who advises their students not to use engines very much.
Um, uh, no, but at the same time, I do suggest that they uh, use them, in certain way, right? So it's wrong to use them too much because then your brain just becomes malfunctioning. Like for example, when I do lessons, I would like to explore the position first, analyze the moves and move pieces, and try to understand what I call the essence of the position, right? And then you turn the engine on and you compare it to the engine, and then you get instant feedback and you know what's going on. So to me, I don't understand people who are saying, uh, like, oh, when we played chess so many years ago, there were no engines, chess was so much fun. It's so much more fun today when you do have engines. You have best player in the world always in your fingertips, so it's just fantastic. It's so much pleasure to study and play chess today.
Yeah, that calls to mind an interesting point that Jakob Aagaard had on his Facebook page, because obviously we've all been, as I mentioned earlier, we both mentioned we've been talking about these young phenoms. I believe we have four juniors over 2,700 with Firouzja, Gukesh, Sarin, and this is embarrassing that I'm not going to think of.
Abdussatorov.
Thank you, and Abdussatorov being just having crossed as the fourth. And the explosion of online tools and engines in particular certainly has contributed to that. But Aagaard was saying in his post that he still thinks it's a special time, that you can't just assume there's always going to be four juniors like in the top 20 over 2,700, and that these are people who are going to be top players for decades and take 20% of the space in that list. Do you agree with that? Like, do you think it's just this trend of younger players getting better and better is just gonna accelerate, or is this a special crop of players, these current juniors?
It could be either way. No, but the fact that you have four players of this strength is very unusual. Yeah, it is very unusual because if you look back at the history, you can see that most of the time you see one player dominating, right? So, like, Karpov or Kasparov dominated chess for so long, and now Carlsen. And so those periods when there is no domination by one particular player, they it's almost like it's rare. Though maybe some people might argue with me, Spassky Petrosian times, maybe, in 1950s, maybe nobody dominated. But yeah, we got spoiled by those, by Karpov, Kasparov, and Carlsen, three giants. But you can see, it could be either way, but it's very easily Jakob could be right. That those four players could be dominating for the next 20 or so years, and there will be, it could be that for the next 5, 7, who knows how many years, we will not get player of such strength. It's possible.
Okay. Yeah, and I did check 2700 chess. I forgot to mention Aragasi, and obviously there's Vincent Kaimar and Pragananda. The list goes on. So not meaning to leave anyone out. And hearing you mention Carlsen, Gregory, the Magnus news is still new enough where I have to ask everyone for what they thought about his decision not to defend the title.
I think I understand him completely. I understand him 100%, and I feel like if I would be in his shoes, I would consider this true. Yeah, because the point is that it's a huge effort. You basically have to put your life on hold for 6 months or so, right? And if you you ask a question, what for? You see, so he already proved everyone, including himself, how good he is. He's a world champion, and so why would I do that if I, I am set financially for life. I don't need, I'm not desperate for money, right? Why, instead of enjoying myself, enjoying life, continuing playing chess, I would put my life on hold for 6 months and prepare for those grueling matches. I understand him 100%.
Yeah, I'm with you. I know some people are less understanding, but
yeah,
but
and I heard Alex Fishbein's prediction, and but with all my respect and sympathy for Alex, he's my friend, but he predicted that 2020 presidential election will end in a landslide. So he has a bad history of predictions. So
okay, that's good to know. Yeah, and yeah, for listeners who didn't hear it, he was just saying he thought that Magnus would lose some of his shine. His peers might respect him a little less, and that the main prediction is that his results will decline in the next 2 years, which yeah, I disagree as well, and only time will tell. He did lose 3 points in the Olympiad, so if he keeps that up, he'll lose some points eventually. Okay, couple more things, and then we'll let you go, Gregory. Number one, I have to ask. I mean, I tried to prime you on what I considered your greatest hit stories that I came across, but did I miss any in terms of your interactions with legends or your career highlights or your most cherished chess memories, I guess we could say?
Yeah, I have lots and lots of stories which I can tell, but I would like to just tell one story, which is, in my opinion, instructive story, and which helped me a lot in my future life. So it happened in I believe either 1979 or 1980. I was a young master, and I was helping my friend Valery Chekhov, who is older than me. He was a world junior champion. At the time, he was playing in Soviet Championship. And he had a great tournament in terms of creative input. Okay? But he ended up in the last place. He won 3 games. He lost 8. Many of them he lost in terrible time troubles in winning positions. But his win against Lev Sakis, who tied for first with Belevsky, was the best game of the tournament. He sacrificed 2 pieces. So in my opinion, he played great. But lack of experience, some nerves, time management cost him to have a bad tournament, right? And then there was a closing ceremony, and Mikhail Tal, who didn't play in the tournament, flew for the closing ceremony, right? I didn't go to the closing ceremony. And I came to Valery's hotel room next morning. And I see him sitting with his hands wrapping his head. And he tells me, I didn't sleep the night. I said, what happened? I overheard how at the table next to me, Tal said, the example of how not to play chess was shown in this tournament by Valery Chekhov. I said,
Yikes.
what? And why would it make you so upset? He probably was drunk. Tal, was known, to being drunk and so forth. Why? No, 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 no. He's a former world champion. He knows what he's talking about. So, and it definitely had a huge impact on him. And this story was a huge lesson for me. I remember, I was 20 or 21 at the time, and I said to myself, okay, I'm not going to depend on what other people will tell about me. I know myself, who I am. I know all my problems, all my weaknesses, and I will not hear. I will listen what other people say, but I will not be influenced by that to the degree of, losing my self-confidence and, listen to those negative thoughts. So this was the story which I thought was very instructive.
Yeah, a great lesson there. And to sort of tie that to your life story, Gregory, you did mention that you got a job out of university. What was the moment where you were able to transition from working outside of chess to like, okay, I'm a chess professional now?
Yeah, so according to Soviet laws at the time, since the education was free, you had to work for the state for 3 years after graduating college. And so I did work for 3 years at the plant, which was doing railroad equipment. And after those 3 years, I was able to leave, and basically I started the life of chess professional. I was teaching a little bit and playing a lot, and and this was around 1984, 1985, and then things got very quickly. Soon I became IM, then I became GM, started traveling all around the world, and and then my career took off.
And was it easy to survive financially?
And in Soviet Union it was. In Soviet Union it was because like I mentioned before, $1,000 was maybe 5 years salary.
Okay.
So it was. I never had any financial problems as far as I can remember myself. So and then of course my immigration to United States was a fairy tale because my friends in Kentucky helped me tremendously, and I started teaching right away from the very first day I landed up in Kentucky, and I was able to make money. Then I mentioned, my gratitude to Fred Waitzkin. He helped me with students in New York City, and so yeah, financially I never had any problems.
Probably the worst moments were when you were robbed here.
Right, but even this, lasted only for a few days because in few days I was already giving lessons and winning prizes in tournaments, so everything was good.
Yeah, and then you were a pioneer with online teaching. I enjoyed hearing you discuss with Fred Wilson how you were doing a lot of phone lessons, like back in the early 2000s, before Zoom and
I
Skype
think I
existed.
think maybe Lev Albert was the first one who was doing that.
Okay.
But I think I was doing this just I was slowly doing this on a larger scale. Yes, Yes, but
okay. And I think possibly last thing, Gregory, again, really appreciate your taking all this time. There's so much I could ask you about, but I did pull one quote from your profile by Mike Klein, which is you said, I think the most important thing is to be analytical about the events in your personal life. I think this is where chess helps a lot. Many people do stupid things which may make their life experience difficult. Chess teachers help you to find the best solutions. Unfortunately, many chess players do this on the chessboard, but don't do this outside it. So I would love to hear more about this, or if you have any examples from your own life that aren't too personal. I'm sure we might all take something from that, because it certainly resonated with me.
I mean, you obviously can't. Well, first of all, I would like to say that when I do chess lessons, I love to incorporate lessons from chess into life, right? So especially with kids, because that's extremely helpful to be able to teach chess to kids and at the same time positively influence their life outside of chess. And I love to make all kind of analogies. It's also resonates with some adults as well, especially when you know what kind of occupation they have, because you can compare their experiences on their job and what they do on the chessboard, and a lot of times those things are connected. Okay, like for example, I had one student who was a stockbroker, right, and he was very tight with money, and how people in finance, and of course on the chessboard he was holding on material all the time. So there was no such thing as poison pawn. Every pawn has to be taken. So and so when you make this connection and you show the person where it's coming from, it's rewarding for you as a teacher to see this type of connection, and of course it's also a revelation for a student to see those things. So I know I didn't answer your question in the way you wanted me to answer, but it just I guess I have to think before I find an example. Maybe next time if you invite me, maybe I will have the story.
Sounds good to me, and that answer was excellent. And yes, I would love to do this again sometime, perhaps after the World Cup, if you're able, if it happens and you're able to make the trip, Gregory.
Oh, sure.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much. This has been absolutely fantastic. Listeners can you're still updating Kaidanov.org. Is that correct, Gregory?
Yeah, Kaidanov.org. I don't update it, but all the information about my lessons is there. And if somebody wants to contact me directly, my email address is very simple: kaidanov@yahoo.com. So I will try to answer everyone.
Excellent. Yeah. Shout out to John Hartman. I got your email address from him, and then I felt stupid because then I eventually discovered your website and said, "Oh, there's your email address." But yeah, thanks again. This has been fantastic, and yeah, hope we can chat again someday. And yeah, Gregory, you'll have lots of people rooting for you if and when the World Cup happens. Especially, I mean, this is true of all your tournaments, but especially that one. We want you to score one for the older guys.
All right. Thank you very much, Ben. Thank you very much for inviting me.
Thanks to everyone who helps make Perpetual Chess possible. Big shout out to my producer, Matthew Passy. I'd also like to thank the Blue Wire Podcast Network, with whom we are proud to be affiliated. Be sure to follow us on social media, Beneficial1 on Twitter, @Perpetual Chess on Instagram, or you can join the Perpetual Chess Facebook group. You can email me, ben@perpetualchesspod.com. And of course, last but not least, I'd like to give major thanks to the Perpetual Chess Patreon and PayPal supporters. Those who choose to join that community based on their level of support can do things like submit questions for guests of the show, have access to live Zoom Q&A lectures with grandmasters who often have appeared on the show, going over chess games, answering questions, stuff like that. And you can even get access to ad-free Perpetual Chess if that's your preference. So, but most of all, thanks to everyone for listening, and we will catch you all on the next episode.